Hello, Dr. Rachie.
Hello, Richard.
And welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 57 for the, what's the date? The 20th of November 2009. And on today's show, we have a report by you later on, Dr. Rachie.
We do. I have a report from Carl Sagan Day, which was on November the 7th at Broward College in Fort Lauderdale. And I was lucky enough to be in the area, so I jumped on a bus and a train and another train and ended up talking to DJ GrotheDr Phil Plait and the wonderful James Randi.
That's fantastic. That's Dr. Rachie reports coming up later in the episode. But before then, we have my interview with Desiree Schell from Canada, the host of Skeptically Speaking. And that's followed by a grain of salt with Eran Segev, a live report from Hong Kong.
Wow.
So we're here at the Warren View Hotel in the beer garden. It's a heat wave on in Sydney at the moment, so we're just celebrating Rachel's birthday, which was yesterday. Happy birthday, Rachie.
Thank you, Richard. And thanks to everyone who left messages on my Facebook page and tweeted happy birthday. I really appreciate it.
And while we sit here and have another glass of champagne to celebrate with Dr. Rachie, we'll sit back and listen to this episode of The Skeptic Zone.
Enjoy.
Desiree Schell is the host of Skeptically Speaking, a Canadian radio show that encourages the audience to call in and question everything. With a background in event organisation and fundraising, she worked for years in community activism before noticing that although it was fairly easy for people to be sceptical of politics, that didn't necessarily extend to using critical analysis in other areas of their lives. The show is the public version of how she lives her life, where everything you don't already know is fascinating and the things that you do know can seem fresh and interesting when the right person is talking about them. And joining me now from beautiful, beautiful Canada, land of my dreams, is Desiree Schell. Hi, Desiree.
Hi, Richard.
Ah, yes, I have very fond, very distant memories of Canada, as most of my listeners probably know or have heard. I used to live in Canada many, 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 many years ago, in the late 60s, in fact. I hope it hasn't changed much since then.
I'm going to assume it has, a bit.
I imagine you're right. I do remember the snow, though. That's a strong memory. I was in Saskatchewan.
Oh, well, the snow hasn't changed. And actually, Saskatchewan. Maybe that hasn't changed either.
Maybe. And a big hi to all our listeners in Saskatchewan. Now, Desiree, I'm green with envy because you're one of the few people I know who actually has their own broadcastable, as in the public airways, radio, skeptical show. How did that come about?
How did that come about? Well, I actually, we started off with a different show. I was asked to be involved with somewhat of a skeptical show a while back. Although it wasn't skeptical except for me. It was more like a coast-to-coast show. And when my co-host left, it went with the all skeptical all the time format.
Oh, I see. So you sort of took the opportunity.
Absolutely.
So was this sort of a happy accident, or were you keenly interested in being on radio?
No, I was not interested in being on radio at all. I've been a skeptic for a long time, but it seemed like the perfect opportunity to do something that no one else was doing.
I'm glad you took the opportunity. Now, what just for the benefit of our listeners, what radio stations can they tune in to hear you on?
We're actually rebroadcast on citywide LP FM, and that's in Wisconsin. And then Public Reality Radio is in Michigan, and Rossland Radio is in Rossland, British Columbia, here in Canada. Also on Free Thought Radio.
That's quite a spread you've got there. It's quite a wide selection of choices people have to tune into your show. Do you find you're getting much feedback from radio listeners?
Absolutely. I get a lot of emails from Michigan specifically, and I think that's because they have the biggest audience. Mm-hmm. But I just got an email from Dublin, Ireland yesterday, and that was the first one from there, and I'm thrilled. Absolutely.
Well, of course, you're in the same position as me and lots of other podcasters where you are podcasting, skeptically speaking, as well. And also, I'm delighted to say when you're doing your show live, people can tune in on the internet and hear it as it goes out. Actually,
and now with the change in format, we're also doing Ustream as well. So people can actually watch us in the studio.
Is there no privacy anymore?
None at all. And quite honestly, that was Jarrett, my producer.
I think that's a fabulous idea. The more contact you can get with your listeners, be it on the website or on radio. And you also take callers, too. I mean, the more I think about it, the more you're telling me the situation, I'm just getting green with envy again and again. I'd love to take live callers. What's that like to take talkback?
Well, that's actually one of my favorite things about this show, is that we get the opportunity to talk to people, not just skeptical people. The radio station that we originally broadcast on, CJSR, it's definitely, I would say that the majority of the listeners are not skeptics. So we frequently get calls telling us how homeopathy worked for them or why we're wrong about vaccination issues. And those are they're always really interesting conversations. This show is definitely very much about outreach.
I understand the situation. I've recently just started a slot on here on Sydney radio, which I'm with Dr. Rachie, which we're very glad to get. But our first caller and our very first segment was somebody ringing up. Actually, the first caller was somebody ringing up telling us that they'd seen ghosts, and the very next caller was somebody ringing up telling us how their dog was cured with homeopathy. And I loved it because she started off by saying, "I used to be a skeptic."
Oh my. That's interesting.
I'm sure it'll probably happen to you. People love to think we're wrong because for some reason they think they were once skeptics themselves, but something changed their mind. Of course, I don't know what they mean by when they say they used to be a skeptic. Obviously not a skeptical person as we understand it. What is your attraction with skepticism in general?
I would say that I guess I was a political skeptic first. Mm-hmm. And I only started using critical analysis in other areas of my life, sort of later on, because using your brain is kind of addictive, actually. Like once you notice...
That's a good slogan. I like that.
Once you notice that you're not being presented with the whole story, the whole story in one area, it kind of bleeds into other areas too. You get used to doing some digging.
I see. Using your brain gets addictive. Mm-hmm. I think that's going to appear on T-shirts before we know it. Now, another issue I'd like to talk to you about, especially after the last amazing meeting in Las Vegas, there was a lot of talk afterwards about gender issues and the balance of men and women and this sort of thing, which, rightly or wrongly, didn't exactly cross my mind at the time. It's probably due to doses of jet lag and whatever. But afterwards I understood there was quite a current of conversation regarding the amount of female participation in something like TAM. I don't know if that can also be related to DragonCon, although I think there were more females involved in DragonCon. What's your take on this issue?
Well, I would say that this is definitely not TAM specific. I think there's... At TAM itself, from what I remember, there was approximately a 30% attendance rate for females at TAM, mm-hmm. And which is not bad when you think about it. But the speakers, there were 17% female speakers, and then you look at something like DragonCon, and it was 42%. I thought,
mm-hmm. Not having done the figures myself and not taken stock at DragonCon, just from my vague memories, again, it was suffering jet lag, I seem to remember quite a lot of female speakers at DragonCon. But I must also admit, at the time, I wasn't running around doing a count saying how many females are here, how many males are here.
Oh, I like stats.
Do you?
Well, I don't want to go with my gut instinct on things like that. I would rather back up and make sure that my perception is actually correct.
Yeah.
But again, that's not TAM specific. There's that's very similar to a lot of the regional skeptical groups that we look at in every country, really. I think that's definitely something that we have to work on, and I guess a lot of people have a lot of different opinions on how we go about working on that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, because the perception in this country, and I'm sure you'll know where I'm coming from, is that skeptics are basically middle-aged to older white men, usually with beards, and usually as quite a negative, stereotypical image of them, of people who are so set in their beliefs and do not want to know about anything new or interesting or fascinating, and they're almost like they're scared in a way. Now, I'm delighted, especially with what you're doing, is that there are, dare I say, younger and female skeptical voices out there, so the person new to skepticism isn't being bombarded by this one point of view from the older white bearded male.
Oh, and I would definitely say within Canada, we have quite an active skeptical community within the regions, and just recently we started up something called Skeptic North, and it's the first pan-Canadian skeptical blog. And we have writers from Vancouver and Edmonton, all over Ontario, Nova Scotia, and there's a lot of gender parity, really. We've got I think it's almost 50-50.
That's very encouraging, and certainly here in Australia, it's heading that way rapidly. I'm delighted to say, with people like our very own Dr. Rachie, Kylie Sturgis, Joe Benamu on the Skeptic Zone alone, Amanda Rose. We have a high female input, but you know what? I didn't set out to do that. It's just that I was looking around for the best people, and a lot of them happen to be female, which of course is delightful.
You know, that's interesting, because some of the other communities with really with a high percentage of female involvement, I hear a lot of that from the men involved, saying we were just looking for the best people. These are just the people that showed up.
Yeah.
So I do find that interesting.
I find it very encouraging.
Definitely.
And I don't know if you've noticed this. Do you have skeptics in the pub where you are?
We do.
What I've noticed here in Sydney is, again, without taking stock, without counting heads, is a huge percentage of the people we get coming along to our social pub nights are female.
See, and that makes me happy, because the less recruitment we have to do, the better. And women don't only recruit other women, they recruit men as well. But if a single woman walks into something like Skeptics in the Pub or Drinking Skeptically for their first time, and they see a bunch of other women there, it's going to be more likely that they're going to feel more comfortable.
And so, saying all this, I mean, I'm bagging older white male skeptics, and I shouldn't really be doing that, because a lot of them are fantastically good skeptics and great people. I mean, the most startling and dare I say amazing example is the amazing Randi, of course.
Absolutely. And that being said, we really need the benefit of people who have been in the community for years, because that's who we learn from. We learn what works and what doesn't, and what issues have been covered, and how things have been responded to in the past. I don't want anybody to think that those people aren't necessary or that they're being pushed out. But it is lovely that I think everyone writing for Skeptic North is under 40.
Now I feel old.
No. It's just it's wonderful. There's definitely a freshness. There's a lot of people who maybe have been involved with skepticism for under 3 years. So they have this huge amount of energy that they want to pour into this, which is fantastic. And quite honestly, it's the people that have been doing all the work in this community for years deserve to take a bit of a break. We can pick up some slack.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I would love to be part of any, whatever help I can to encourage skepticism anywhere, but especially when I think about it in Canada. One of my very good friends, Fred Bremer from Vancouver, of course, is very active, and he does the Skeptics in the Pub in Vancouver, and I catch up with him at DragonCon, or NATAM, I should say, which is fantastic. Now, what plans do you have there in Canada for conventions, may I say?
We've discussed this, but I think Skeptic North has been up for 27 days now, which is
it's about time for a convention, isn't it?
I know.
27 days.
But quite honestly, the first time that all the Canadian skeptics sort of met up as a group was at TAM. And that, really? I think, was the most beneficial thing to me. Yeah.
That's interesting.
We did a Canadian contingent meetup at TAM, and it was myself and Scott Gavura, who writes Science-Based Pharmacy, and he's also a contributor to Skeptic North.
Of course.
He and I organized a Canadian meetup, and we had almost 50 people there. And I think I can speak for myself and say that was the first time I really had any idea what was going on in Canada. So Skeptic North is something that came out of that. And this is sort of the first step in developing sort of a national organization. This is only a blog to begin with, but this is a place where we can all network. We can all figure out who's who, who's doing what, what's working where, and hopefully we can develop something else out of that. And quite honestly, Richard, we've been looking quite heavily at the Australian skeptics because you guys have built something amazing there.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, there's a lot of people have certainly put in a lot of years to do this sort of thing. I myself became involved out of pure curiosity and interest in the topic. And I'm sure a lot of people would feel the same way, but I can't help feeling that the Canadian skeptical movement is just in the process of starting to really blossom and boom at the moment. And that's very exciting.
We are, and we're very much looking at you guys as a model. Like, you've done some amazing work there, and in terms of just building your credibility is fantastic, and just acting as a source for mainstream media, and that's really what we're trying to do. Like, again, we've only been doing this 27 days as a group, and we were mentioned twice in the National Post last week.
That's great.
And actually, that was Scott for something that he wrote on autism quackery. So the mainstream media is watching, and they're picking up on this. So thank you for acting as a mentor that way.
We're happy to help in any way we can, of course. But I must admit, I keep coming back to this envy I have because for us here in Australia to attend things like DragonCon and TAM, which we love to do, is a big trip. There's no two ways about it. We have to come right around the planet to be there. So why I envy you is that although it's a trip, of course, for you to attend these things, it's only a couple of hours flight, I would imagine. Mm-hmm.
Which makes it easier. And actually, there's a number of conferences that I want to attend. Not solely skeptical either. There's something called Science Online 2010 coming up in January, which is a science blogger convention in North Carolina. And those kind of things are very interesting to me because skeptically speaking is not just about pure skepticism. Some people would say pure skepticism. We deal a lot in experts in scientific fields and just, random geekery as well. So I like to see what's out there.
Yes, you seem to be able to get a very impressive line of guests to come onto your show. Adam Savage, in fact, has been on your show.
We were very lucky. Yes, we've had Adam Savage on. We've had Phil Plait, Randall Munro, creator of the webcomic XKCD, Daniel Loxton from Junior Skeptic.
Of course, another Canadian.
Mm-hmm. He's brilliant. And you. Thank you. Yeah, we've been very lucky.
Well, lucky is one way to look at it, or you may look at it as you've put in the hard work, and you're doing the hard work in getting the message out there and the skeptical voice on the radio, which, again, is something which I think everybody should congratulate you for. I think you must have one of the only skeptical radio shows in the world.
I think we are the only one if we don't count your new show.
Well, our new show is really guest appearances on somebody else's show, but it's good to have something. But yours is an hour dedicated to the topic we all love.
And we do love the fact that we can provide audience interaction, because that's, after listening to skeptical podcasts for years, my big problem with it is that I always have questions. And maybe I'm just too lazy to send emails to people, but I always thought, I wish I could ask my question right now. And that's what I want people to do. I want them to be able to follow up immediately with what the experts are talking about.
Now, doing a live show, of course, presents all its own interesting problems. I mean, yes, I'm sure it does. Right now, I'm recording you and you're recording me, and I have the benefit of editing this to get rid of the times we cough and sneeze and fall off our chairs or whatever we're doing. But live, of course, is a different story altogether. You must have had some interesting moments.
Oh, my. Yes. Technical issues are always potentially a problem. It is, the show is initially broadcast out of a community radio station. It is not set up for what we need to do. We bring most of our own equipment in with us. But, there's always the risk of a guest canceling, Skype calls being lost, potentially very embarrassing questions being asked. That has happened.
Do you operate on a delay, or is it absolutely live?
I feel like I shouldn't say this, but no, we don't have a delay. Don't take advantage of that, people. Most people are fairly respectful, and intern Ryan is brilliant. We have no problem cutting people off should they start going somewhere that we don't want them to go. But to tell you the truth, Canada has fairly reasonable laws in terms of stuff like that. Who doesn't, though, is the states. So we have this we have to do editing before we put it on iTunes, because we do have rebroadcasters in the States. And one time we made a mistake and we let a swear through, and one of the rebroadcasters was very, very unhappy with me. So if you're listening, I still apologize.
Oh, no. Now, what's the future for your show at the moment? Are you just, it's doing well, I take it. It's no end in sight, I hope. Do you have any interesting plans or interesting guests coming up?
Well, I know who I want to get.
Your wish list.
My wish list, Will Wheaton.
Oh, yeah.
I absolutely want Will Wheaton. I would like Michael J. Fox. I don't know if you guys know who Michael J. Fox is.
Another Canadian, of course.
Another Canadian. I would love him to come on and talk about stem cell research.
That would be fascinating.
Who else would I like? Cory Doctorow.
You could tick off the Canadian stars. You could have William Shatner.
I would love to have William Shatner on, but I've heard enough about that man that I would be afraid that he would never leave, and I would just lose my show. But I love him, William Shatner. If for some reason you are listening to this, please come on my show.
Yes, Mr. Shatner, the invitation is there to go and skeptically speaking with your fellow Canadians. But there are many huge Canadian stars out there. Let's see, Paul Schaefer. Although I don't know what you talk to him about, but at least he's Canadian. Donald Sutherland, there's another one.
Donald Sutherland. Good call.
Yeah. And the list goes on and on. I mean, there are a lot of Australian stars, big Hollywood stars, of course, but they're more obvious, I think. Sometimes you don't realize it's a Canadian star.
People confuse Canadians with Americans a lot, unfortunately, much to our chagrin. We don't dislike the Americans. Most Canadians are fairly proud of the fact that we're very polite, very nice. Minnesotans, we get confused with Minnesotans a lot.
Really?
I don't know why. Apparently we have similar accents.
Oh, okay. Well, I can sort of understand that. You're not too far from them. Now, I think the first time I met you please forgive me if I'm wrong, was in Las Vegas at the Skeptic party.
It was.
And it was near the pool, and there I was, and there you were, surrounded by hundreds of people, very noisy, and you shoved a microphone in my face.
That's very me, Richard. Yes.
I thought, what's going on? But I didn't mind it. I didn't mind at all. They said this is for the Skeptically Speaking, and away we went. In fact, it's interesting listening back to that because my memories of that whole time are a little bit of a blur, so it's good to know I was there.
Good. I'm glad I can be of service.
Do you enjoy doing those on-the-spot sort of interviews?
I do. I love doing interviews, and I think that's just because I naturally have a lot of questions. So it comes very easily to me to just voice whatever's in my head. Being on this side of the mic actually is the uncomfortable part.
I can understand that. I love doing roving interviews or live or on the spot, whatever you like to call them. Does that take up a lot of your show? Do you try to do that? Do you try to get out and about with your little microphone?
A while back I thought that would be a large part of the show, but as it's gone on, I think people enjoy the ability to interact far more. Now, unfortunately, we still don't get enough calls, in my opinion. People are still a bit afraid of being on a live radio show. But we do get a number of emails each show. So,
right.
And that's fine with me. As long as people are interacting, that's great.
All right. Now, let's tell everybody how they can interact, in fact. And indeed, I remember calling your show once here from Australia, so no matter where you are in the world, you can call in and talk to you. What's the best way they can do that? What's the best website?
They can go to skepticallyspeaking.com, and it has all the different ways that you can contact us. There's phone during the show. There's also email during the show. We also do Twitter. We also, like I say, we recently started using Ustream, so I am on video, which is something that my producer wants, so that's fine. But there's a chat room connected to Ustream as well. So there's actually sort of a chat community starting every week. It seems to be a lot of the same people coming back. So I encourage people to check that out, definitely. Okay.
And when exactly is your show live to air?
Every Friday we're live from 6 to 7 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time.
Mountain Daylight Time. Mm-hmm. Now, listeners around the world, you'll have to run to your computers, your internet, and do all the translations and the time conversions. Here in Sydney, Australia, that equates to something like 10 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays.
Actually, we did something because we have so many listeners around the world that we're getting very confused as to times. And quite honestly, me trying to book interviews is painful sometimes. If you go to our website, there's actually a countdown to the next show. Makes it easier for everyone.
Very good. That's the way to do it, everybody. And please, wherever you are in the world, tune into the show and don't be afraid to call in. If you have a question, Desiree will be happy to talk with you, or you could talk to the special guest, whoever it is at the moment. I really, really encourage you to do it. And I encourage you to tell all your friends and enemies about the show, Skeptically Speaking. It's very enjoyable. And also subscribe to the podcast, which is on iTunes, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Well, Desiree, what a pleasure it's been to talk with you. I sincerely hope, and all kidding aside, that the Canadian skeptics do have some sort of meeting or convention or something like that. Just do me a favour, have it in the middle of winter, because I miss all that snow, you know?
I think that may be the first time anybody has ever said that about Canada.
Desiree Schell, thank you very much.
Thanks, Richard.
Are your friends telling you that your lack of a love life is because Mars isn't rising in the house of Jupiter, and that it's just like a Sagittarius to question things? Have Suzanne Summers and Jenny McCarthy become the sole source of medical advice for your mother-in-law? Have you had to argue the fact that the efficacy of coffee enemas has not been proven by science? Has the use of the evolution is just a theory argument driven you to the point of telling your coworkers to, okay, Okay, stop using gravity then, as dealing with dowsers, arguing with anti-vaxxers, harping on homeopathists, quarreling with Calations, squabbling with Scientology, and bickering with Bigfoot left you wondering, what can I do to fight the woo? Then head on over to the James Randi Educational Foundation at www.randi.org and contribute to the Season of Reason fundraising campaign by clicking on the donate button. Every dollar you give helps fight woo the world over. Don't just get frustrated. Get involved. Donate at www.randi.org.
Every channel all that I do is see grain of salt, grain of salt, grain of salt.
Let's all take this with a grain of salt. Here's Eran, Sagan.
Grain of salt now, grain of salt, you gotta take it with a...
I have recently spent a few days in Hong Kong. My friend Alethea, a local skeptic, told me about Hong Kong's Noah's Ark Museum and suggested it as an interesting place to visit. She might have been joking, but I took her suggestion seriously, and on a cold and windy Hong Kong day, headed on the 30-minute ferry ride from Hong Kong Island to Park Island. I've done a bit of research about the place before going, and one issue that came up in several sources was that the museum is not upfront about the underlying religious agenda, and was portraying itself as a sort of environmental museum. I was looking forward to finding out how a creationist message can be hidden in a museum whose centerpiece is a supposedly life-size replica of Noah's Ark. Here are some of my experiences from the visit to the museum. I apologize for the quality of some of the audio, especially that which was recorded outside in very windy conditions.
I've just come off the ferry, and looking across a narrow stretch of water, I can see the Ark, and it is huge. It is absolutely unbelievably huge. I'm going to obviously come a lot closer. It's now probably about 300 meters away from me. But I'm taking some photos, which I'll probably put on the podcast website, just to clarify how big it is. It's really very impressive. It's clear right from the start that there's definitely an intention to make it quite scientific here. A bit of a natural history museum of sorts. There's statues or models of different animals, like various raccoons and deer and the red panda, and there's information about them, accurate information as far as I can tell. It's definitely not something that would be controversial, along with their conservation status, how endangered they are. So that's a pretty good start, I'd say. I'm near the Ark at the moment. It's really huge. I'd say it's probably about 10, maybe 12 meters tall. I'm not sure, I can't even guess what the length is, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's about 80 meters. It's very large. It looks like it's made of fake wood. It doesn't look like it's made of wood. It looks like one of those planks of plastic that made to look like wood. I'm now near the entrance to the Ark, and there's a huge accumulation of very large animals here. They're all life-size. There's some grizzly bears to the left of me here. They actually look a little bit oversized rather than life-size. Life-size rhinoceroses, life-size hippos, life-size elephants, and 4 giraffes. Not sure why 4. Perhaps 2 good giraffes and 2 evil giraffes.
Yes, so it's a big hole in the whole thing. I mean, with the humans we understand the idea of good and bad, evil and very, very good. Saintly, I suppose. But with animals, what in fact is an evil giraffe? How do they... I will eat all the leaves on this tree. I will eat more leaves than I should. And then other giraffes may die. I am an evil herbivore.
I've just entered the Ark, and that's where the museum is, inside the Ark, the main part of the museum. And I must say that the first thing that they mention is the creation. So it's not quite as hidden as it was suggested to me. It's not too explicit, but it's in the presentation that you may be able to hear behind me. It's in Chinese, so I can't understand it, but there's subtitles. And they do put links to the Creation Museum, and they show the Creation Museum in the United States in that presentation. And they have a presentation here of all kinds of arks built around the world, including, I'm ashamed to say, one that's in Israel. None in Australia, fortunately. That's good. The emergence of corruption and destruction of harmony. I think that's probably the theme of this museum. It's trying to create a link between what's happening today and what's supposedly happened in the times of Noah. The world's crises and problems repeatedly recur throughout history. Then they go on to say that according to the Bible, from the creation of man to the birth of Noah, some 10 generations had elapsed, during which evil acts were increasingly perpetrated by mankind, destroying the originally perfect world created by God. Blah, 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 blah. Finally, God decided he would destroy mankind with a great flood, saving only Noah, his family, and all living animals. He could survive through the ark and await a new world. All living animals, as far as I know, only very few living animals would have survived the flood inside the ark. Interesting interpretation. Okay, this is now where there's a presentation about the building of the ark. Not the original one, the one here. It's 13.5 meters tall, 22.5 meters wide, and 135 meters long, which is even longer than it looked to me from the outside. It gets better. Apparently, there's a conspiracy by the top intelligence agency of the US. It found a mysterious object on Mount Ararat and had kept silent for nearly half a century. There's a screen here. It says confidential. I'm wondering if I put my hands... Oh yeah. I put my hand there and it scanned my fingerprints, supposedly. And it's now showing all kinds of anomalies on Mount Ararat. They look like rocks to me, but maybe they're the Ark. I'm not sure, really. Oh, this is getting better and better. They're now showing information about US astronaut Colonel James Owen, who was the 8th man to walk on the moon. And he walked on the moon, but when he tried to climb Mount Ararat in 1982, he fell and hurt his head quite badly. And some would say he hurt his head before climbing Mount Ararat, but that's me. And the title of this is A Life-Threatening Experience. Climbing Mount Ararat is more challenging than walking on the moon. Yeah, right. I've just come out of a very interesting 3D movie about the flood. It was combined with special effects like a moving floor and bass sounds that really increased the effect of the movie. It was really rather impressive. If they'd shown the same kind of movie about the flooding of the Mediterranean basin, which is probably the source of the flood, then I would have been impressed. But no, the water actually came not only from the sky, but also from within the earth, somehow like little geysers, but spewing huge amounts of water. Another thing that I found interesting about the movie was that Noah, his family, and all his fellow men and women were all Chinese. I've now entered a part of the exhibition that is more about nature, really. There's talk about all kinds of animal and plant life, showing bees and ants and all kinds of fishes. But amongst all that, there's questions on the walls like what causes the other planets to rotate endlessly? I think we know very well what causes them to rotate endlessly. And can man survive on any other planet apart from the planet Earth? That is probably the most creationist question you'd ever hear. The anthropic principle in reverse. Very amusing. I've just attended a 4D movie about the state of the world, in which they showed how humans ruin the world with garbage and with environmental disregard. And of course, it ended with us being saved on Noah's Ark. Hopefully a metaphorical one this time. Okay, well, I've found something interesting even here within the treasure house, the kids section. There's a large model of a T-Rex skull here. They're describing what fossils are, and it's great to see how they managed to completely avoid the question of time. Fossils hardened like rock are remains of ancient animals and plants. Through studying fossils, we can learn more about lives in the past. And they explain here that fossils form when animals and plants are quickly buried by sand or mud. Over time, many layers of mud covered the remains, and after many, many years, 6,000 apparently, they hardened and became part of the rock, forming fossils, just avoiding the question of how long is many, many years. Okay, so that's the end. I've gone through the entire museum. The museum is really very well executed technically, but it's very eclectic. The message is incoherent. So in terms of content, I'm not sure how useful it is. I'd guess you'd have to be convinced about the truth of the creation story and of the flood story before you come here in order to really believe it. But it's, again, technically very well done. I'm hiding from the wind at the moment. It's a very cold and windy day in Hong Kong today. But I'll be signing off, but not before I mention that there's a repeated motif throughout the different exhibits here, and that is the rainbow. The rainbow keeps coming up, and I'm just wondering whether subconsciously the designers of this huge exhibit somehow subconsciously support the gay community. So this is Eran Segev taking the creation story and the story of the flood with a grain of salt.
Grain of salt, you gotta take it with a...
Recently, you may have heard about the Australian Senator Nick Xenophon, as he made a strong attack against the Church of Scientology from the floor of the Senate chamber, thus giving himself parliamentary privilege, which means he can't be sued for his statements. The Church of Scientology has hit back and gone on the offensive. Here is a short clip from an interview with a representative from the Church of Scientology on the Sunrise program here in Australia, in which she discusses the Church's attitude towards donations.
And now Virginia Stewart from the Church of Scientology joins me. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Okay, Dean Dethridge, who was part of the Church for 17 years, says he participated in concerted efforts to extract as much money as possible from parishioners with no regard for their financial situation.
Well, I'm sorry, but Dean, I definitely... I don't know what Dean does, but I know this is how the Church works in regarding donations. Yep. So we don't tithe, we don't have any other businesses that are like profit making. So we don't have like a newspaper or a hospital. The way that Scientologists donate to the upkeep of their church and to our social programs is through payment for a religious service. So if they wish to take a course or they wish to take religious counselling.
One bloke last night said he spent $1.5 million on these courses.
That's
They're
right.
Pretty expensive courses.
But we've also given him quite a substantial sum of money returned. So so the Church does have a policy that if you make a donation and then you decide that you don't wish to pursue with Scientology or you don't wish to do a service any longer, say they say, I don't want to be a Scientologist anymore, we actually return their donation.
You get a refund?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I hope you're enjoying the show so far. It's a little intermission break and to give you a little taste of Sydney in the summertime. And I'm sure you can hear those cicadas. That to us, isn't it, that's the sound of summer.
You know, Richard, remember when we were in Atlanta for the Star Party at the observatory and you recorded cicadas there? And they were all singing together, weren't they?
No, well, sort of differently. These ones sing together here.
That's right, that's the difference. These ones sing together, but in Atlanta they sang their own songs. Yeah, but that's really loud.
This is really loud. Very loud.
And they do that by rubbing their wings together, don't they? Is that right?
Their feet, I think. Their legs.
Their legs. Yeah. Amazing.
Those people who are coming to Sydney in November 2010 for the convention, this is what you have to look forward to.
And bring your bathers, people.
Examining the truth and exposing the frauds, badpsychics.co.uk is the website that critically examines mediums, clairvoyants and psychics. Follow the controversies, news and discussions in the lively forum community.
And now you can download your weekly fix of Righteous Indignation, the official podcast of badpsychics.co.uk that talks hard and critically about the paranormal. badpsychics.co.uk, the UK's largest and most respected skeptical site looking at psychics.
Now it's time for Dr. Rachie Reports with Dr. Rachael Dunlop.
Carl Sagan was an astronomer, astrobiologist, author and scientific communicator, and arguably the most memorable and successful populariser of science who ever lived. He is best known for his 1980 series Cosmos: A Personal Voyage, which has been seen by more than 500 million people in over 60 countries. The best-selling book of the series is the highest-selling science book ever published in English. An incredibly prolific writer, Sagan published more than 600 papers and popular articles and was author, co-author and editor of more than 20 books. His novel Contact was made into a major motion picture starring Jodie Foster. As a scientist, Sagan pioneered exobiology and promoted the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI. He also played a leading role in the American space program as a consultant to NASA since the 1950s, on such projects as the Mariner, Viking, Voyager and Galileo expeditions to other planets. He is the recipient of many prestigious awards, including the NASA Medal for Distinguished Public Service, the NASA Apollo Achievement Award, and the Public Welfare Medal from the National Academy of Sciences for being, quote, enormously successful in contributing to the wonder and importance of science. It was also said of Sagan that, quote, his ability to capture the imagination of millions and to explain difficult concepts in understandable terms is a magnificent achievement. Carl Sagan remains known for his wonderful quotes about the universe and the fragility and insignificance of humanity. Perhaps one of your favourites is contained here. We live in a society exquisitely dependent on science and technology, in which hardly anyone knows anything about science and technology. The truth may be puzzling, it may take some work to grapple with, it may be counterintuitive, it may contradict deeply held prejudices. It may not be consonant with what we desperately want to be true, but our preferences do not determine what's true. I don't want to believe, I want to know. For me, it is far better to grasp the universe as it really is than to persist in delusion, however satisfying and reassuring. Who are we? We find that we live on an insignificant planet of a humdrum star lost in a galaxy tucked away in some forgotten corner of a universe in which there are far more galaxies than people. And finally, skeptical scrutiny is the means, in both science and religion, by which deep thoughts can be winnowed from deep nonsense. Well, recently, listeners, I was lucky enough to attend the very first Carl Sagan Day, held at Broward College in Fort Lauderdale on November the 7th. A joint effort of the Centre for Inquiry in Fort Lauderdale, the Florida Atheists and Secular Humanists, or FLASH, Broward College and the JREF, the day was a celebration of the life and work of Carl Sagan, which was held 2 days before what would have been his 75th birthday. The day was celebrated across several sections of Broward College, including an outdoor area filled with stalls and a barbecue, continuous screenings of Cosmos, stargazing after dark in the observatory, and a series of interesting talks. The MC for the day was DJ GrotheDr from the popular podcast Point of Inquiry, who introduced Russell Romanella, who is the director of the International Space Station project at NASA, David Morrison, who is a senior scientist at the NASA Astrobiology Institute in California and an ex-student of Carl Sagan's, Dr. Phil Plait, who we all know from the Bad Astronomy blog and now the president of the JREF, and to finish off the day, the amazing James Randi. DJ kicked off proceedings by sharing his thoughts about Carl Sagan and explained how the work of Sagan has influenced the direction and also the work of the Centre for Inquiry, where DJ is a vice president. You can find the full audio of the lectures from the day archived at Ustream at www.ustream.tv/discovery/recorded and do a search for Carl Sagan Day. But before you go running off to your computers, we have some teaser audio and some behind-the-scenes interviews from Carl Sagan Day 2009. First up, we hear from the chairwoman and brains behind Carl Sagan Day, Senior Professor of Chemistry and the Director of CFI Fort Lauderdale, Jeanette Medea, as she introduces DJ GrotheDr.
I got involved in the Center for Inquiry about 8 or 9 years ago because of their great role in skepticism. I'm a chemistry professor here at this college, and 10 years from now, if people don't know how to balance an equation, I'm not sure it's going to affect the quality of their life. But if they don't know how to make critical judgments about what they're hearing on TV, reading in the paper, the junk that they're hearing on TV for $19.95 plus shipping and handling, all these miracle cures and things. So we need to teach them to think critically, and the Center for Inquiry showed me that that's the organization that's going to help that happen. So I jumped in with both feet, and I'm up over my ears by now, but I love it, and I love what it represents. DJ GrotheDr is the Vice President and Director of this outreach program for the Center for Inquiry. He also does a phenomenally successful podcast called Point of Inquiry, so some of you may know him from that. So thank you for coming down to South Florida to be a part of this, DJ, and I'll turn the mic over to you.
Well, welcome everyone, and the people with whom I've rehearsed those cap calls and celebrations of Point of Inquiry beforehand, thank you. It is my pleasure to be here, and when Jeanette asked a couple months ago for me to get involved with this, a couple weeks ago for me to be Masters of Ceremonies, a couple days ago to give a presentation, it was my pleasure. If you know any of the history of the skeptics movement, Carl Sagan and James Randi, who you'll hear later on tonight, were founders of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry in the 70s. Over the last decade of traveling and working with grassroots activists, science advocates, the single biggest reason people report for getting involved in this, well, they have two reasons. Some people cite James Randi, whom you'll hear tonight, and a lot of people say it was Carl Sagan that kind of riled me up, lit fire under my tuchus, got me excited about advancing science in our society. Carl Sagan's skepticism was not mere skepticism. It was not just saying no to other people's beliefs. It was affirmative. It was constructive, not just destructive. His skepticism wasn't just a way to criticize beliefs, but it was a deeply, you don't hear it framed like this often, a deeply ethical enterprise. A lot of people know Carl Sagan as the science booster. But for thousands of people in the United States and around the world, he's a leading figure in organized skepticism. And his skepticism was an act of moral obligation. It wasn't just something smart people do when they decry the nonsense beliefs of others out there. His was a moral imperative, I'd argue. Whether you believe in space aliens, that they're going to come and sort out all our problems so we don't have to, or you believe that the faith healer, supposed faith healer, is going to heal your medical conditions rather than relying on medical science. Sagan acknowledged that undue credulity could harm people, and therefore the skeptic community or leading folks like him had a moral obligation to speak out against it. For him, science and skepticism were for everybody, not just the cognitive elites. He wasn't just some smug scientist who rejected nonsense like Randi, other luminaries of contemporary skepticism. He repeatedly said he was open to changing his mind if you proved him wrong. And I think there's a profound and beautiful humility there. And I'll end with talking about what, to my lights, is the most compelling characteristic of Carl Sagan's science and skepticism. And that's that it informed an understanding of the meaning of life. At the end of Cosmos, you've been challenged to re-examine your understanding of your place in the universe and the meaning of that place in the universe. When he talks about being on the shores of the cosmic ocean, that's a different message than being told some of the other narratives that society explains our existence with. So Carl Sagan, his skepticism fleshed out life. It wasn't nihilistic. He was open-minded in his skepticism and very tender-hearted in it. And in that, it makes perfect sense that we would have a Sagan Day memorializing and celebrating this kind of skepticism, which is all too rare in American intellectual life today. Thank you.
Well, hello, DJ.
Hello, my dear. How are you?
Welcome to the Skeptic Zone. I'm
Skeptic
good.
Zone. I can so tell that I'm in the Skeptic Zone standing around you.
Yeah. Can you feel the zone?
I feel the vibe of the zone. The zone's vibe. I feel it right now.
The zone vibe. So we've had a good day. Where are we? We're at Carl Sagan Day today.
We are at Carl Sagan Day at Broward College, co-sponsored by the James Randi Educational Foundation, the Center for Inquiry, a number of other local organizations. And it's been a full day of lectures and live streaming, kind of remote via satellite type stuff with people giving lectures, but from their living room, right?
Yeah.
And then something like 20,000 viewers in their living rooms got to watch this throughout the day. At least that's the numbers they just told me.
Wow, that's amazing.
And in fact, that was before tonight's talk, so it may well be more than that.
Well, of course, we had James Randi as the last talk tonight.
And judging from the enthusiasm online, I think a lot of people tuned in to that.
Yeah. And it was fantastic to hear him. He gave a personal account of really his relationship with Carl Sagan and what he learnt from Carl Sagan when they were friends, and it was very moving towards the end, wasn't it?
It was. I think people got a little emotional because he recounted, the anecdote about how he had an impulse to reach out to Carl because something funny, astronomical happened. He heard a joke, and he had to pause. He had to stop and realize, Carl's dead. I can't just pick up the phone and call him. And then at the end, he shared the lessons that he learned from Carl, kind of his long relationship with Carl. Very moving presentation. I'd like to let your listeners know that they can get all this online through any of our websites, the JREF's website, CFI's, the other local organizations' website. Phil Plait, obviously, on his blog will share all this as well.
So you're the vice president of CFI, and so part of the work that you do, obviously, is educating people about science. So what did you learn from Carl Sagan in that sense?
As one of the vice presidents of CFI, well, my specific role is directing the outreach program, so our network of centers, our campus outreach, and Sagan is really almost an organizational role model to us because he isn't just about the cognitive minorities. He's not just about all the skeptics getting together or all the atheists or all the humanists getting together and looking at people who believe unlike them and judging them somehow or that sort of stuff. Instead, he's all about outreach. He has the audacity to believe that skepticism in science is fit for everyone. That's Carl Sagan, and that's what CFI believes. Ours is a public education mission, not a mission to kind of set up skeptic or atheist support groups around the country. So ours is a larger outreach agenda. I think gels really well with Carl Sagan's effectiveness as a public science advocate.
Well, it's the anniversary of his death. Is it December the 20th?
Yeah.
But it's his birthday on Monday.
His birthday on Monday,
yeah.
He would be 75, I believe.
Yeah.
And it emphasizes how young he was when the brute facticity of everyone's death kind of hit him. So young.
Yeah. Well, he died at 65, didn't he?
Very young.
Very, very young. And he contributed such wonderful things to us. Contact, the movie, which he consulted on, and, of course, the wonderful Cosmos series, which everyone should see, right?
Right. It's a life changer. If you haven't seen it, even if you're a skeptic, even if you're a big, regular listener to Skeptic Zone, if you haven't seen Carl Sagan's Cosmos, don't stop listening to the Skeptic Zone right now and go watch it. But after you've caught up on Skeptic Zone, watch that PBS series Cosmos, and he had a number of other great titles. My favorite, and not a lot of everybody has different favorites, right? I'm really partial to his book of essays edited with Annie Drian, Billions and Billions, and one of the last essays, maybe the last essay in there, he talks about really being able to connect with and empathize with people who believe in the afterlife, even though he doesn't.
Yeah.
And he talks about the desire, the kind of almost hunger he has to believe in the afterlife and wish that he could communicate with his parents, knowing full well they're dead. They're kaput. They're not going to be talking to him.
Yeah.
But it showed that he really had a heart, and that's my collection. That's the collection of his that I like most.
Yeah. All right, well, thanks for taking the time to talk to us, DJ. Have you had a good day?
I've had a fun day, and we couldn't have conspired to make it more fun with you here. So fortuitous, you're in Miami for work or whatever, and you can skip on over to this event in Fort Lauderdale. So, Dr. Rachie, it's a pleasure to chat with you.
Well, thank you, and it's actually your fault that I'm here because I saw your Twitter, and that's how I knew that this was on. So thank you to you, DJ.
Well, thanks for coming. It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Thanks, DJ. Hello, Phil Plait, and welcome to the Skeptic Zone. How are you?
Oi!
G'day.
Good day.
G'day, Phil.
Oh, it's lovely to see you again.
I had a minty from you today.
Yes, you
did. I was
did.
very impressed. I'm in the middle of Florida, near Fort Lauderdale, and I was given a minty by Phil Plait.
We're almost as far from Australia as you can possibly be.
We are. We're almost
But,
around the other side of the globe.
I have to thank Richard Saunders for addicting me to the most wonderful of all candies on the planet.
And what do you call it? White gold or something, don't you?
Me, personally, I just call them minties.
Oh, fair enough.
Well, they are. It's like it's white cocaine.
White
Now wait a
cocaine.
minute. Cocaine
We're hanging
in
away in
taffy
Miami.
form.
You can't say white cocaine.
Yeah, yikes. Shh. Yeah.
Don't tell anyone. So, Phil, we're at the first Carl Sagan Day at Broward College. It was a fantastic day, and you gave a great talk about how we're all going to die, which was really nice. Thanks for that.
After a NASA space shuttle and space station guy, the guy who's in charge of putting all this stuff together and make sure it's ready for spaceflight, talking about the future of humanity and how wonderful spaceflight is, I come in and say, we're all going to die.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
In lots of nice ways, though. It was.
Well, that's true.
Yeah. So you talked about a couple of movies today that sort of depict death from the skies, I guess you'd call it. So you mentioned Deep Impact and you mentioned Armageddon, and you talked about some of the reasons why they're wrong. But in particular, you targeted Armageddon for just being completely wrong in so many ways.
Huge piece of crap, I think, is the phrase you're looking for. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. This is a family show, Phil.
Oh, is it?
Go ahead.
Okay, huge piece of... All right.
Yeah, so can you tell us a couple of things that they did wrong? You talked about a scene where Bruce Willis is trying to climb up onto the asteroid at the end and...
Yeah, well, everything in the movie is wrong. You just have to watch it. Okay. The funny thing was the movie started off almost okay. An amateur astronomer discovers the asteroid, and 20 years ago, that was, 10, 15 years ago, that was the way most of them were discovered. Now it's automated surveys and things like that. But after that, it's just ridiculous. They say the asteroid's as big as Texas, and Texas is about 1,000 miles across. And there's no asteroid that big. It's discovered 18 days before it's going to hit the Earth, which is ridiculous. That's like 3 times the distance to the moon. It would have been discovered when it was 100 million miles away and years in advance. And they're going to blow it up, and that doesn't work that way. It's a huge asteroid. There's nothing we have powerful enough to blow it up. Bruce Willis, in the end, climbs out of the hole that he's dug to put the asteroid in. Or the bomb in, and he's going to blow it up, and you hardly even see this in the movie. It's so fast, but it's raining.
Yeah, you pointed that out.
It's raining on an asteroid. There's no air on an asteroid, and there is like a little bit of mist. They show it and stuff like that. It's not like there's air on the asteroid. So it was just a pounding, unending, relentless amount of stupidity in that movie, as opposed to Deep Impact, which was a thoughtful, smart, far more interesting and engaging movie, even though it was slower and I don't know, more of a human and emotional drama than it was about the wiping out of humanity itself.
But it still had some great special effects, didn't it?
Awesome.
You showed the bit where they have the tsunami from the smaller asteroid that hits. Is it an asteroid or a comet?
A comet, yeah.
And it
hits the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, and it has that scene where there's a tsunami that knocks over most of New York City.
Yeah,
and
it's cool.
I think that goes on to completely encompass Sydney Harbour as well, right? Do you remember
does
that?
it? I don't remember.
I don't know. It was
because it's a foreign country, so I don't care. Yeah, I'm an American.
Yeah, but they have minties there.
Yeah. Oh, God. I don't know where the minty factory is. Maybe it's in Perth. It'll be safe. So.
Yeah, possibly.
No, wait a minute. No, Sydney's on the Pacific coast.
Yeah, that's right.
But it hit in the Atlantic, so maybe it would wipe out Perth or some other Australian city. I can't remember what else is on the West Coast. Is there anything else on the West Coast besides Perth?
Phil, your mom should get on the Skeptic Zone.
Yeah. My mom is actually
Phil's
here.
Phil's mum is here.
Tell her how smart and funny and good looking I was as a child.
He was actually adorable.
Yeah.
Well, he had like a mother.
Well, I was torturing a cat, and
he had the most gorgeous hair you've ever seen in your life.
I still have it. It's in a bag. She is recording this for all of Australia to listen to.
For Australia.
Oh, how lovely.
And
do you have a message for Richard Saunders? Because you're wearing his earrings, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
And he'll be listening to
Are they flamingo earrings? Yeah, there we go.
Is that
not a flamingo?
It's a...
No, the tail goes down. It's hard to say. Is it a swan or a crane? It's a crane.
It's a crane, yeah.
They're lovely earrings. I have never worn them without getting at least one compliment. Always.
That's fantastic.
So you should buy Richard Saunders origami earrings.
People just notice them. Yeah. And I have to make a comment, like the gentleman that was sitting behind me.
Well, it's funny because we're both wearing Richard Saunders earrings. And the guy behind us asked where he could buy them from, didn't he? Yeah, he did. This is true, Phil.
That's right. MysteryInvestigators.com/origami, right? Isn't that right?
And Phil's also wearing a pair of Richard's earrings
That's
today.
true, but you can't see them. I'm not pierced where it's obvious. So.
Yeah. That's too bad.
Well, thanks, Phil, and thanks, Phil's mum, for joining us today on the Skeptic Zone.
Thanks, Dr. Rachie.
I'm here with James Randi at the Carl Sagan Day in Broward College in South Florida. Hello, Randi.
A pleasure to be here.
It's lovely to see you. And you just gave a wonderful talk about your experiences with Carl Sagan.
Mm-hmm.
And I was particularly moved by the last part of your talk when you mentioned that you'd seen a funny joke about astronomy and you went to pick up the phone. You remembered he's not here anymore.
Yes, it shows you how you can cling to a memory like that, you know. But I must tell you also, as an addition to that, I took his number off my automatic dialer at that point because I realized it's difficult to do that because you have to admit that someone's not there anymore.
Yeah.
But I did it finally. I broke the tie.
Yeah.
But he'll always be with me, one way or the other.
Well, you told us some wonderful stories tonight about his work, but also you gave us some very funny anecdotes. Can you tell our listeners about the story of him and his demands for talks and the reasons why he asked for such more and more things when it came to lectures?
Well, certainly, of course. Carl once told me, when I commented on the very large sum that he demanded to go out and travel and do lectures, which was $20,000 in a day when $20,000 is a lot more than it is today. And not only that, he demanded a private jet and stay in the very finest hotel, in the biggest suite in the hotel, and a private secretary who would travel with him, because as was shown earlier today, he always dictated. He never typed himself.
That's right. He didn't type any of his work, did he? Right. He never learned to type. Yeah.
But that's one reason why his writing was so excellent, because it was conversational. He dictated it, and it was transcribed that way. So it's different from something that you sit and peck out at a keyboard, of course.
Yeah.
So he kept asking he asked for a secretary, you said, in an expensive room.
All of these costs, and the reason for it was he didn't want to do these things. He didn't like to travel. He was so busy with his own agenda and doing his regular work that he didn't have the time to do it. He tried to discourage them. And he said to me, but hey, if they're going to pay that kind of money and give me all that, he said, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Strange.
Well, you also mentioned Carlos, and of course, Carlos is very famous in Australia. And in fact, I was on radio with Richard Saunders only 2 weeks ago.
Oh, yes.
And we were talking about the Carlos thing. And I wondered, also recently, of course, Don Lane passed away in Australia.
Yes,
and you were all over the televisions again because of the incident where you were thrown off the Don Lane show.
Can you imagine?
Now, can you tell us a little bit about that Randy?
All about the episode with Don Lane?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Well, I appeared on Don Lane's show, and he told me in advance, I told him, I don't want to do the stupid Uri Geller tricks of bending keys and forks and things like that, spoons. I just don't want to do that. I want to talk about the possible reality of these phenomena and the case against it. And he said, oh, no, I understand. But then he betrayed me. And that's something that I never actually revealed while Don was alive. But he betrayed me because the prop man, just before the show, came to me and he said, oh, do you want to see the keys and spoons?
Oh,
and
really?
that alerted me right away. And I said, no, it's quite all right. But I knew what to expect. So he didn't take me by surprise when he uncovered these props on the table. And, of course, I then succeeded in doing the trick. And he got very angry. And he said, well, you can just piss off.
Yeah.
And in a typical Australian manner, of course. You see. And
I think he said something about you because there was a channeler there.
Doris Stokes.
That's right, yeah.
Doris Stokes. And he said she was such a nice lady. No, she wasn't. She was a rotten old lady, as far as I was concerned. But I must say, in respect for the Australian folks, everyone in the studio and in the airport the next morning, and in the airport when I landed in Sydney, because I had to take a trip in order to do the program, they all recognized me, and they came to me and said, oh, he's not American. He's not Australian. You know.
He's American.
He's an American, yes. And they were also apologizing for him and saying, oh, I'm so sorry. That was a terrible thing for him to say.
Yes.
So everyone was apologizing to me. Everywhere I went, I couldn't go into a restaurant without people clustering around me and saying, oh, you know, he's not an Aussie, you know. He's actually an American, you know.
Well, I asked you as a question at the end of the lecture, what's happened to channelers? Where are they? They're not around anymore, right?
Well, they're not very popular now.
Not as much as they were.
They had their coming and going, you know, and they went, and I think we're all better off for it.
I think you're right, yeah.
Yes.
But then there was one that you told me about in Perth who came to Australia and then heard about what you'd done, and what happened there?
Yeah, she got into the airport, and the reporters clustered around her and said, oh, are you with James Randi? And she immediately turned around and got back on the plane. Can you imagine?
Well, you've done us a service, Randy. Thank you for that. You've got rid of the channelers from Australia.
So. Well, thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to speak with you.
Thanks, Randy.
There has been an incredible coalition that caused this event to take place, including the Center for Inquiry, Fort Lauderdale group that I'm involved with. There's some of you heard this earlier, a CFI on campus group here on the Central Campus. We have a local group of activists, FLASH, Florida Atheists and Secular Humanists, that we have partnered with on various activities. Broward College has been incredible in terms of not only donating the facilities, but helping fund a great deal of what you see here and what has happened today. And it could never have really happened to the point that it did or anywhere near it if last February I had not said something to James Randi and said, you know, we're thinking of doing a special day just to honor Carl Sagan. And I think you had tears in your eyes. I'm going to say you did. You were very moved by that, and you said that would be a wonderful thing to do. And we approached him, and we were hoping at the most to get his endorsement. He has been involved in this, in the planning and what he has provided and made this possible. So This has been a partnership that I personally cherish because such wonderful things have come of it. This is from the Office of the Mayor, City of Fort Lauderdale, a proclamation. Whereas Carl Sagan was born on November 9th, so Monday is the actual birthday, 1934 in Brooklyn, New York, became involved in Center for Radio Physics, space research, advisor and consultant to NASA. I mean, it's a whole page, and you can certainly look at a copy of this. In addition to numerous awards, recognitions, and honorary degrees, Carl is acknowledged as one of the effective faces of astronomy and space science throughout the world. He inspired a love of astronomy, and we heard people here today say that he was the moving force that got people excited about this. He passed away in December of 1996 at the age of 62. On November 7th, 2009, the first annual Carl Sagan Day will be celebrated at Broward College and will include guest speakers, workshops, food, games, lots of events. Again, from the City Commission and signed by the Mayor of Fort Lauderdale, this coming Monday is officially declared Carl Sagan Day in Fort Lauderdale. Next year, that's not going to be good enough. We want the state of Florida, we want the whole country, we want a note from President Obama that the United States...
Have you ever wondered why it supposedly took God 7 days to create the world? I mean, if you're God, why not just do it in 1 day? Have you ever thought that some religions have too much influence on our society, that laws should be based on rational thought and evidence, and not unprovable personal beliefs? The Global Atheist Convention will be held in Melbourne in March 2010. It will be the largest gathering of atheists, rationalists, skeptics, freethinkers, and other like-minded people in Australia's history. The presenter list is incredible and includes Richard Dawkins, author of The God Delusion, Catherine Devaney, comedian and regular writer in Melbourne's The Age newspaper, and P.Z. Myers, author of the world's top-ranked science blog, Pharyngular, plus many more. This is a unique opportunity to hear from remarkable presenters and meet other people who just might think about religion and society the same way you do. Don't miss out. Go to atheistconvention.org.au for more information and tickets. We'll see you in Melbourne.
Well, thank you for listening to The Skeptic Zone, episode number 57. And we're still here enjoying the evening here in Sydney at Rachel's birthday drinks.
Can I just say, listeners in the Northern Hemisphere where it's snowing and freezing, it is absolutely sweltering in Sydney. It's sweltering in Adelaide at the moment as well. So most of Southern Australia and Eastern Australia is really, really hot right now. And it's trying to thunderstorm, but it's failing, isn't it, Richard?
Yeah, there was a few spots of rain and some lightning, but nothing else.
Nothing else. And I think we've gone into what's now known as catastrophic fire danger in Australia, and that's a new classification for wildfires here. And basically, if you get a classification of catastrophic, it means get the hell out. And certain parts of Australia, including parts of New South Wales, are currently declared catastrophic. So I want to send a message to my dad especially. He was dispatched at 3 a.m. this morning to go to Yorke Peninsula in South Australia to fight the catastrophic bushfires there. So I hope he's okay, and I hope everyone on the Yorke Peninsula in South Australia is okay.
So listeners in North America and Europe and all those places, while you sit back and throw another log on the fire, we'll try to cool down here in Sydney, Australia. Until next week, this is Richard Saunders and Dr. Rachie signing off.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.
The Skeptic Zone.